I still remember the first evening she walked into our house. The front door opening slowly as warm orange sunlight spilled across the floor, and there she was, standing beside my dad with a small smile on her face, holding a suitcase in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. "Ryan," my dad said nervously, "this is Vanessa." Even her name sounded elegant. She looked at me, smiled softly, and said, "So, you're the famous son I've heard so much about." I laughed awkwardly and replied, "Depends on what he told you." She tilted her head playfully. "Mostly good things." At the time, I was 24, working remotely as a freelance designer while temporarily living at my dad's house, saving money for my own apartment in Chicago. Vanessa was 38, calm, confident, intelligent, and honestly way too beautiful for someone like my dad. Not that he was a bad guy, but Vanessa had this magnetic energy around her. She wasn't loud. She didn't try too hard. Yet somehow every room felt warmer when she walked into it. And from the very first week, things became complicated. Not because anyone crossed boundaries, but because attraction sometimes grows quietly, slowly, in tiny moments that seem harmless until you realize they're staying in your head longer than they should. The first few days were normal. Dad left early for work, Vanessa unpacked upstairs, and I stayed in my room working late nights. But every now and then she'd appear in the kitchen with coffee and that effortless smile. "Cream or black?" she'd ask. "Black." "Dangerous choice," she'd tease. Small comments, harmless conversations, but somehow they always stayed with me. One afternoon, I walked downstairs half asleep after working all night and froze when I saw her standing near the counter in an oversized white shirt, flipping through a cookbook with her hair loosely tied back. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead." I cleared my throat. "Morning." She laughed softly. "You work too much." "Bills exist," I answered. "Still," she said, looking at me carefully, "you should learn to enjoy life a little." I shrugged. Maybe I forgot how. She held my gaze for a second longer than usual and quietly replied, "That's fixable." Somehow, that sentence stayed in my head the entire day. Over the next month, we became unexpectedly close. We watched movies late at night, whenever Dad worked overtime, argued about music, joked about each other's terrible taste in films, and slowly the house stopped feeling lonely. One rainy evening, the power went out across the neighborhood. Perfect. I muttered from the living room. Vanessa laughed softly. "Relax, Ryan, it's romantic. Only serial killers say things like that during blackouts." She laughed harder while I lit candles around the room. The soft golden light reflected across her face, and for a second I genuinely forgot how to breathe. She caught me staring. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "That's definitely not a nothing face." I looked away quickly. "You just look different in candlelight." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "Different good or different scary?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Dangerously good." Silence filled the room, not awkward, just heavy. Vanessa looked down briefly, then smiled. "Careful, Ryan." "Why?" "You flirt better than you realize." I laughed nervously. Wasn't trying to flirt. That's what makes it effective. After that night, something shifted between us. Nothing obvious, but there was tension now, a quiet awareness that appeared in accidental eye contact and smiles that lasted 1 second too long. I tried ignoring it, seriously, but Vanessa made that impossible sometimes. Like the morning she walked into the kitchen after a workout, cheeks slightly flushed, carrying a water bottle while teasing me for waking up late. "Most people are awake before noon," she joked. "Most people don't work until 4 in the morning." Excuses. "You enjoy bullying me, don't you?" She leaned against the counter and smiled. "A little. Good to know. You make it fun." God, that smile. The strange thing about attraction is that it grows strongest during ordinary moments, not dramatic ones. Sitting together on the porch during sunset, hearing her laugh upstairs, noticing how she tucked her hair behind her ear whenever she felt nervous. The more I noticed, the worse it got. Then one night, Dad left for a 3-day business trip, leaving just me and Vanessa alone in the house. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, but somehow the entire atmosphere felt lighter, more dangerous. That evening, she ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and suggested movie night. Halfway through the movie, a thunderstorm started outside, rain hammering against the windows while Vanessa curled up beneath a blanket on one side of the couch and I sat on the other. At least, that was the plan, because during a sudden jump scare, she instinctively grabbed my arm, then immediately pulled away. "Sorry, it's okay." But neither of us moved away after that. The tension returned instantly, thick and impossible to ignore. She stared at the screen, pretending to focus. "I hate horror movies," she admitted quietly. "This isn't even scary." "Easy for you to say. You literally grabbed my whole arm." She smiled softly without looking at me. Maybe I needed emotional support. A few seconds passed before she quietly added, "You smell really good, by the way." I turned toward her slowly. "Vanessa?" Her eyes met mine, and suddenly the movie didn't matter anymore. The storm outside grew louder, but somehow the silence between us felt even louder. Then her phone rang. "Dad." And just like that, reality returned all at once. That night, I couldn't sleep because I realized something terrifying. I was falling for her, and no matter how wrong the timing was, I couldn't stop it. The next morning felt awkward, at least for me. I stayed in my room pretending to work until Vanessa knocked gently on my door. "Ryan, can we talk?" She stepped inside carefully. "About last night, nothing happened," I said quickly. "I know, so we're fine." Vanessa studied my face carefully. "You're avoiding me." "No, I'm not." "Ryan." I sighed. "Okay, maybe a little." She crossed her arms. "Why?" "Because when you looked at me during that movie, it felt like the world disappeared. Because every conversation with you stays in my head for hours. Because hearing your footsteps upstairs somehow became the best part of my day." But obviously I couldn't say any of that. So instead I shrugged and said, "Just tired." Vanessa smiled softly. "Liar." I laughed to spite myself. "You're annoyingly observant." Occupational hazard. "What occupation?" "Reading people." I looked at her carefully. "And what am I thinking right now?" Her expression softened. "You're trying very hard not to feel something." Silence filled the room. My heartbeat slammed against my chest. Vanessa looked away first. "Anyway," she whispered, "I made lunch." Days passed, then weeks, and instead of fading, our connection only grew stronger. We stayed up talking until 2 a.m. about life, regrets, dreams, fears, everything. One night, while sitting outside beneath the stars, Vanessa quietly asked, "Do you ever feel like your life started before you were ready for it?" I looked at her. "All the time." She smiled sadly. "You get me more than most people do. Maybe because we're both disasters." She laughed softly while the wind moved through her hair, and in that moment she looked emotionally lonely, like someone who spent years pretending to have everything together. Without thinking, I reached over and lightly touched her hand. Vanessa looked down at our hands, then back at me. Neither of us moved away. "Ryan," she whispered, and hearing my name from her somehow felt dangerous, beautiful, addictive. The closer we became, the harder it got to hide. Dad started noticing little things, shared jokes, lingering glances, the natural ease between us. One evening during dinner, he joked, "You two gang up on me a lot." Vanessa smirked. "Because you're easy to bully." "Exactly," I added. She laughed. And beneath the table, her hand brushed mine accidentally, or maybe not accidentally. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. The touch lasted 1 second too long before she slowly pulled away without looking at me, somehow making it even worse. A few days later, Dad left again for another overnight business meeting. That evening, Vanessa found me sitting outside near the pool. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Too much caffeine." She sat beside me, close enough for me to smell her vanilla perfume. For a while, neither of us spoke before she suddenly asked, "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" I looked at her. Every day. Me too. The pool lights reflected softly across the water, while the warm night air surrounded us. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Ryan, yeah?" She looked directly into my eyes. This connection between us. My heartbeat nearly stopped. "I know," I whispered. "We shouldn't encourage it." "Probably not. But sometimes," she admitted softly, "I feel like you're the only person who actually sees me." That sentence hit harder than any flirtation ever could. I looked at her carefully and replied, "Maybe because I pay attention." Her expression softened instantly. "You do." Another silence settled between us, warm and dangerous, before she smiled faintly. "You're trouble, Ryan." I laughed quietly, pretty sure this is both our fault. She shook her head while smiling. Fair point. And for one suspended moment, it felt like the world disappeared completely. No rules, no complications. Just two people sitting too close together beneath the midnight sky. Then reality returned once again. Vanessa stood first. "We should go inside." "Yeah." But neither of us moved immediately, because leaving meant ending the moment, and neither of us wanted that. Weeks later, I finally moved into my own apartment downtown. Dad helped carry boxes upstairs, while Vanessa quietly arranged kitchen supplies. When Dad left briefly to pick up dinner, Vanessa and I found ourselves alone in the empty apartment. She walked slowly toward the window and smiled softly. "You did good." "Still feels unreal." "That's normal." I looked at her carefully. "Feels weird leaving home." Her expression turned more vulnerable. "I'll miss you, Ryan." "God, that voice." I stepped slightly closer. "I'll miss you too." Silence settled between us again, the familiar, dangerous kind. Vanessa looked up at me slowly. "Meeting you changed my life more than you realize." My heartbeat thundered. Same here. For one impossible second, it felt like we might finally cross the line we'd been dancing around for months. But instead, Vanessa smiled sadly and gently fixed my collar. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Somehow that tiny touch felt more intimate than anything else could have. Months passed after I moved out, but Vanessa and I still texted occasionally. Harmless conversations about movies, work, life, random jokes. Yet every message carried the same unresolved tension. Then one winter evening, my phone buzzed. "Vanessa, your dad's out with friends tonight." I stared at the screen before another message appeared. "I made too much pasta." I laughed and replied, "That's the worst excuse I've ever heard." Her answer came instantly. "Are you coming or not?" When I arrived, snow covered the driveway while warm light spilled from inside the house. Vanessa opened the door wearing a soft sweater and jeans. Simple, beautiful, dangerous. "You took forever," she teased. "Traffic." "Liar." "Okay, maybe I changed outfits 3 times. She laughed immediately. Dinner felt easy, comfortable, like no time had passed at all. We talked for hours while soft jazz played quietly in the background. Eventually, Vanessa looked at me and smiled. "Dance with me?" I nearly choked on my drink. "What?" "Relax," she laughed. "It's just dancing." Easy for her to say. Still, I stood up. She stepped closer and placed one hand lightly against my shoulder while I carefully rested my hand near her waist. Suddenly, breathing became difficult again. We moved slowly across the kitchen, while snow fell quietly outside the windows. Vanessa looked up at me, and for the first time, neither of us looked away. "You know something?" she whispered. "What?" If we met differently, I already knew the rest. I could see it in her eyes, feel it in the silence between us. So instead of making things harder, I smiled softly and whispered, "Yeah, I know." Because not every love story needs to become physical to feel real. Sometimes the strongest connections are built on tension, on restraint, on moments that almost happen, moments that stay in your head forever. Vanessa rested her forehead lightly against my chest for one brief second before stepping back with a soft smile. Thank you for coming tonight. Anytime. And in that moment, I realized something important. Maybe attraction isn't always about crossing the line. Maybe sometimes it's about knowing the line exists, feeling every emotion anyway, and still choosing to protect something meaningful, even when it hurts, even when the chemistry feels impossible to ignore. Because real connection lingers long after the moment ends. And Vanessa, she stayed in my mind long after that winter night. Maybe she always will.